Okay.
So he says having a chronically elevated insulin level is detrimental for other reasons. Not only the high insulin levels cause obesity, insulin tells your body to store fat, but also signals that fluid should be retained, leading to edema and hypertension. So your body begins to collect water. And when it collects water,
Your joints
that's another reason why your blood pressure begins to go up.
Right.
Right? Right. Chronic high insulin provokes plaque development inside the arteries. Right? Because the insulin damages it and it starts to build plenty plaque. It also suppresses growth hormone needed for the regeneration of the tissues and many other physiological functions.
Right.
Okay? In the 1980s, researchers began to ask whether obesity, coronary artery disease, hypertension, and other medical problems that occur together are really separate diseases or manifestations of one common physiological defect.
All right.
Right? The evidence now points to one defect, and that is hyperinsulinemia, or excess insulin levels in the blood. But that hyperinsulinemia starts out with your hydrogenated oil and your trans fats.
Yes. I can see it now.
Hyperinsulinism is the physiological event that links virtually all of our degenerative diseases. It is the biochemical corollary or marker of the events described in heart diseases. You know. The other thing that happened is that in America, you had a situation where America started this huge investment in agriculture. Right? And with a huge investment in grain, which had a huge investment in oil, cooking oils and things like that. And one of the things that you had is that people didn't used to eat a lot of grain. So you had to help them. So you bring out the 4 food groups and how they should be eaten.
The pyramid.
Yes.
The food
Which is
pyramid.
a waste of time. When you compare that to, say, the Mediterranean diet and how the Mediterranean people eat, and they're much healthier, or the Japanese people eat, right? So that pyramid that they have, which they still teach in college and university,
Right here.
right?
Right here. Right here.
Right, yeah, as being the be all and end all,
Yeah.
you know.
Basic food groups, yeah.
That you say, hey, but that was to foster the buying of food, so that you have a situation where somebody comes to you with diabetes and they say, well, tell me what to eat and things like that, and you say, all right, no flour. Oh God, what go eat?
Yeah. I remember when a prime minister we had stand up and tell him eat more ground provision, what happened? They tear the man to shreds. Yeah.
Because ground provision is in the same arc. I don't think that people understand that your diet should really fit your lifestyle.
Yeah.
What has happened is we have maintained the slave diets
Yes.
with a change in slavery.
Yeah. We are no longer slaves, but we're eating like slaves.
Oh, I am so sure, but we're no longer slaves. You get in your car in the morning and try to get down the road in 15 minutes. And it's going to take you an hour and a half. Right? So you have a situation where you say, okay, in those days, just 3 or 4 generations ago, 5 generations, right?
Yeah.
You had to get up with your fork and your shovel and things like that. And the man said, well, you see this here, you had to bust that out today.
Yeah.
Right? And you in the sun and you working hard.
Yeah.
It has some people never take a fork and dig up a piece of soil.
Just try to get it in the ground.
Right?
Yeah.
This is if it dry, just try to get it in the ground.
Yeah.
So they don't know. And when you stick that fork in there and you do so and you break up that soil, and you bring that up, that's what, 40 or 50 pounds of soil that you have to lift and turn over.
Yeah. And it's all your back muscles, your legs,
all your back muscles and your legs and things like
your
that.
neck, everything involved in that.
So everybody doing that used to be fit and used to burn calories. So when lunchtime come,
Yeah.
you eating calories.
Yeah.
You eating calories because you have plenty calories to burn out. So eating that, you're drinking plenty coconut oil and all kinds of things like that. And the person's slim. But we're not in that kind of slavery anymore. We're in the slavery of sitting down in a car, air conditioned, which means you ain't even sweating,
Yeah.
right? Getting frustrated, go down the road,
Falling asleep on yourself.
fall asleep. And then you're going to go into the office and you're going to sit down at a desk in air condition all day doing figure work or something like that.
Data entry.
So the amount of people who are working what you call physically hard
Yeah.
are in the minority.
Yeah. And then when you do all of that, sitting down and waiting and typing, you come home and bowl, I tired. Right? And I want a good solid dinner.
And yes, and so they go and they eat plenty stuff.
Yeah.
And then what happens is a couple of years later, they can't understand why they put on 100 pounds.
Yeah.
They talk about carbohydrates as energy generation, but in actual fact, before, when you had to generate energy, the body would use oil very very
Effectively.
selectively, because of the fact that you couldn't get up every morning with lactic acid crystals in your muscles, where you're paining and you could scarcely move. Right? No, he says, so protein and fats requirements are relatively fixed and can be controlled with the appetite. It is actually very difficult to overeat fats and proteins. You ever notice that?
Yeah.
If you have meat and it have plenty fat on it, you start to eat a few pieces of the fat, you say, boy, that isn't good. By the time you put it 2 or 4 forkful in your mouth, you start doing so and cutting it out and putting it aside. Because your body tell you, no more fat. Protein is the same thing, right? Because what happens is after a while is the body will turn off your thing, but it doesn't turn you off for carbohydrates. However, carbohydrate intake should be intimately related to our level of activity. If you run a marathon every day, a balanced diet would probably include 300 grams of carbohydrates per day, which contain about 20 potatoes or 6 brownies. How many people sit down and eat 6 or 8 brownies, and the only thing they're moving to do is to go to the bathroom and come back, right?
Quite a few.
If we sit on the couch all day, obviously our requirements for energy will be less. In this case, a balanced diet would include about 65 to 70 grams of carbohydrates per day. Any more and our bodies are forced to make more insulin, and the whole vicious cycle begins. The problem of diabetes can be summarized by saying that the Western diet has us eating like marathon runners, and that's because of the 4 food groups. Now they've tried to scrap that 4 food groups thing, but I suppose 20 years later they'll scrap it in Trinidad, right? He says type 1 diabetes responds equally well to a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet. In fact, before insulin was available, the only way to treat type 1 diabetes was a high-fat diet from which carbohydrate foods were completely excluded, because the body does not eat insulin to assimilate proteins and fats. If you drink coconut oil, it turns into ketones almost immediately in the liver and gets absorbed. Doesn't have no big set of digestion or anything like that. And that 2 tablespoons of coconut oil in the morning at breakfast will keep you organized right through lunch. In fact, lunch will come and everybody say, we're going for lunch, and you say, I ain't feeling hungry, because your body's still living off that 2 or 3 tablespoons of coconut oil. So you start losing weight. Unless eaten to great excess, fats do not contribute to diabetes, with one exception. Trans fatty acids in partially hydrogenated vegetable oils can cause insulin resistance. When these man-made fats get built into the cell membrane, they interfere with these insulin receptors.
So that's what we've been saying for the last...
So they finally come down here now and say, hey, you have to eat a whole load of fat, right? Can cause insulin resistance.
Only trans fat. The only fat that causes
Yes. In
And so-
theory, this means that one can develop insulin resistance without eating a lot of carbohydrates. That's why you could have people who are watching the diet, doing very well, right? And they go and they fry the egg in hydrogenated oil, or they throw hydrogenated oil into the cook up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And everything else that they eat in. And they will develop that problem because it will block up the liver, it will block up the cells, right? It will block up the arteries. It's the same thing. In theory, this means that one can develop insulin resistance without eating a lot of carbohydrates. But in practice, partially hydrogenated vegetable oils are always used in very high carbohydrate foods like French fries, cookies, crackers, donuts. Margarine on bread and potatoes that flood the bloodstream with sugar. Trans fats in modern processed foods presents a double whammy for which the human species has developed no defenses.
Right. So basically, in a nutshell, we are eating a lot of stuff, consuming a lot of stuff that we have no right consuming.
I have no right consuming.
Yeah.
You know. Now he goes on to talk about other things. Like he says, there are other nutritional factors in indigenous diets that are helpful for diabetics. First, the diets were rich in trace minerals. Modern science has shown us that trace mineral deficiencies, particularly deficiencies in zinc, vanadium, chromium, inhibit insulin production and absorption. Without vanadium, sugar in the blood cannot be driven into the cells, and chromium is necessary for carbohydrate metabolism and for properly functioning of the insulin receptors. Zinc is the cofactor in the production of insulin. Traditional foods were grown in mineral-rich soil, contain cofactors in the production of insulin. Traditional foods were grown in minerals that contain material-rich bone broth and salt, and included mineral-rich water or beverages made with such water. In the modern diet, the best sources of zinc are red meats and shellfish, particularly oysters, which they're poisoning. Extra virgin filtered olive oil supplies vanadium, and chromium is found in nutritional yeast. Molasses and organ meats like liver.
Okay.
So he says that second, indigenous people ate a portion of their animal foods such as fish, milk, or meat uncooked, either raw or fermented.
All right.
You know, I remember the first time I went to Sweden, and we were sitting down to dinner, and they brought out something like a little hors d'oeuvre kind of thing. I looked at it and I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Raw meat."
That is the raw fish.
Raw meat, raw beef,
Beef, okay.
right? They minced it up and things like that, and did things to it, and they put it there, and you just pick it up and you eat it.
Okay.
Okay? You go to a Japanese restaurant,
Raw fish.
and half of the fish you're eating is raw tuna and things like that.
Yeah.
Now everybody, oh, you could get sick from it. When you consider the millions of meals that are made every day and the amount of times that people get poisoned with that, that's one hell of a track record of safety.
Yeah, but I've seen the Japanese how they it's a whole ritual of how they cut the fish.
Everything.
You know.
So he says when they eat raw or fermented foods,
Yeah.
so they ferment the meat, or they ferment some of the carrots and beets and all that kind of stuff. This strategy conserves B6, which is easily destroyed by heat. B6 is essential for carbohydrate metabolism. It is often the rate-limiting vitamin of the B vitamin complex because it is one of the most difficult to obtain in the diet. Indigenous peoples intuitively understood the need to eat a portion of their animal food completely raw. Oh, the other thing that you get in the Scandinavian countries is pickled herring.
Pickled herring, yes.
You want me to tell you how they make it?
Go
They
ahead.
they catch the herring, they clean it, and they fillet it.
Yeah.
And then they roll it up and put a little stick through it, and they put it in the brine
Yeah.
with all the little probiotics and thing inside there.
Yeah.
And after it has sat there in the sun for a good while,
Yeah.
and it begins to rotten, right?
Ferment.
They
Yeah.
take it out. Well, that too.
Yeah.
And they serve it on a nice dish, right? The only problem is that in order to taste it,
Yeah.
you have to get it past your nose.
Yeah. I imagine that. Yeah.
The other thing that the Germans like to is when they give you a camembert and they tell you, oh, it's rather ripe, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That means you have to hold it quite here
Yeah.
and hold your nose and don't breathe until you taste it. You say, it tasting, ah! It tasting good, but it stink.
Yeah.
You know. So that's the fun of eating all over the world. You know, you come upon all kinds of things.
So the camembert is one of the stinky cheeses.
Yeah, in the German thing.
Yeah.
Ordinary camembert, just kind of smelly, but they don't smell bad. You know.
Okay.
So he says that traditionally these people cook fats rich in fat-soluble vitamins, including butterfat from grass-fed animals, organ meat, shellfish, fish liver oils, and the fat of certain animals like bear and pig. You know, I remember reading a story once where they sent this bishop out in the Yukon, in North Alaska. He had a parish, or this parish is several hundred miles big, you know. So he drives into the village where he's supposed to stay, and it's a completely isolated village. And he has arthritis, and he has pain. And he asks the guy, where's the doctor? The guy said, doctor? Who's that? Who's that? We don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So he said, oh, you're the shaman. You know, he said, no, I want the doctor. To know that they have no doctors. He says, what do you do when you get sick? And the guy asked him, get sick? What is that?
Yeah.
Right? So he there for a while. He bring in his supplies and thing and eating his thing. And then he watched them eating. They'd catch the whale and the seal, and they'd dig up the soil until they hit the permafrost. And they'd put it on top of the permafrost, wrapped up and things like that, and they'd cover it back and they'd leave it there for about a month. Right? When they take it up, the flesh has changed to something that looks like cheese. And he says, what you have to do is you have to get it past your nose. So he decides that if he's living there and all these people are healthy, he's going to eat what they're eating. They say 3 years later, they call him back from there, you know, and he bid everybody goodbye, and he mushed the dogs on his sledge. He was running out with them.
Yeah.
All his arthritis and everything had disappeared,
Yeah.
you know.
And they just from a change in that.
And then I found out that the word Eskimo means he who eats things raw.
Okay.
So they ferment all their foods, right? And it is interesting that they have cholesterols of over 300, 350, and they never have heart problems, and they never have all these problems.
No heart problems.
Which means that we have to have a definition of what type of cholesterol you have in your blood and what is the role that it's playing in order to make some sense of this cholesterol thing that we have, which is another story. So he says, while the optimum amount of carbohydrates food depends almost solely on your level of activity. In other words, your body has to have the ability to work and to blow it out your air.
Yes.
In other words, you have to work it off. So inside that, I then came upon another article, the link between low magnesium and type 2 diabetes. where we talked about sulfur. I had a little note here on sulfur and what we used to do by drinking flowers of sulfur. Or you would have to find sulfurous foods, you know, like cabbage and things like that, garlic and things like that.
Only cruciferous.
A lot of the cruciferous vegetables.
Yeah.
So he says, a new study shows that getting sufficient magnesium not only helps prevent diabetes, but improves blood sugar level in individuals who already have this condition. So what they're finding out is that approximately 80% of the people in America have low magnesium levels, right? So he says, for the appropriate response of insulin receptors to insulin, sufficient levels of magnesium are required. If you don't have enough magnesium, your insulin receptors cannot work properly. You see, you keep expanding the web of what you need and what you don't need, right? And you find out, where do you get your magnesium from?
Well, foods, hopefully.
From greens.
Really?
Because greens are magnesium based. Blood is iron based. So I was reading an article there, and they were saying that if you had somebody and they're anemic, then what you should do is to give them a lot of green juice.
Okay.
And and a little bit of iron, and what will happen is that because all you have to do to change the green juice into blood is to take out the magnesium and put in the iron.
All right. So by consuming the green juice, it's like you're getting the blood plasma.
Yes.
And you just have to energize it.
You just have to pull out the thing, and the liver does that.
Yeah.
Right? He says in a classic vicious cycle, elevated insulin levels cause excessive amount of magnesium to be excreted. So people who have diabetes and using a lot of insulin are always extremely short of magnesium.
Right.
Leaving the mineral needed to manage the insulin in the first place in even shorter supply. So you understand how we have the vicious. So he says magnesium supplementation reduces blood sugar levels in pre-diabetic adults. In a placebo-controlled study published in Diabetes Metabolism, researchers set out to examine with efficacy of magnesium supplementation in reducing blood sugar levels in pre-diabetic adults with magnesium deficiencies. Pre-diabetes is characterized by elevated blood sugar levels that do not meet the clinical threshold for diabetes. Right? The participants were invited two groups. One group it had 382 milligrams of magnetism per day, and the others received a placebo. The team found that blood sugar levels in the magnesium group decreased significantly, along with triglycerides or fat in the blood. Levels of beneficial HDL, on the other hand, rose substantially. So whenever you have a person and they come and they're showing that their triglycerides are high, their HDL is low, the chances are that besides using niacin, if you also use magnesium, you could get the HDL level to come up, you could get the triglyceride level to go down, and put in a little omega-3 oil and the LDL will come down too. What are we talking about, statins?
You don't need statins.
Ultimately, half of all the participants in the magnesium group showed significantly improvement in their blood sugar levels. In addition, there's even more research that showcases the benefits of magnesium for diabetes. So he says, for type 2 diabetes, low magnesium people received 500 milligrams a day of magnesium chloride for 16 weeks and experienced significant reductions in fasting glucose along with normalization of blood levels of magnesium. Others have shown that the type 2 diabetes plummets by 19% for every 100 milligram increase in magnesium intake per day. Right? low magnesium levels can increase the risk of deadly pancreatic cancer. So the insulin kills the amount of magnesium, uses it up, and you're forcing the pancreas to make more insulin, so you set yourself up for pancreatic cancer. He says 80% of the time patients with pancreatic cancer have diabetes, prediabetes, or some form of glucose intolerance when diagnosed. For every 100 milligram drop in magnesium per day, the risk of developing pancreatic cancer goes up by 24%. So if you're not taking it, every 100 milligrams, your pancreatic cancer risk goes up. Individuals with an intake or less of 75% of RDA have a 76% risk of developing cancer, or pancreatic cancer. You say women should get at least 320 milligrams of magnesium, while men should get 420 milligrams.
Okay.
He says, the other thing about it is that a lot of older people have, swellings on the ankles and things like that. They give them diuretics. And the diuretics tend to take down potassium out of the system and magnesium. So here again, you have another vicious cycle. Right?
So they are prescribed something to treat one problem, which has several side effects, because when your potassium and your magnesium go down, you have the risk for diabetes and high blood pressure.
Yep. Don't forget that potassium tends to thin the blood.
Yeah.
Magnesium tends to relax all the veins and the arteries. So between the two of them, you could get a drop in thing. So that's why recently you see, within the last few years, a long time you used to see calcium and magnesium, because magnesium is the antagonist to calcium.
Yeah.
What I mean by that, magnesium is the blocker to calcium in muscles. Now listen to this. You have high blood pressure. You go to the doctor and he wants to give you a calcium blocker so that he doesn't get a strong enough tension on the heart so that he could drop the blood pressure, and he gives you some drug.
Yeah.
When the first thing that he could give you is magnesium.
Yes.
Because in the 2,300 at least enzymatic actions that they have in the liver, right? More than half of them depends upon magnesium in order to operate.
So low magnesium shuts down more than half of your
It makes it function very, very inefficiently.
Yeah.
That would be a right word. So again, you keep digging and you see, all right, that you also have to watch your magnesium. You have to watch your magnesium intake, you have to watch your chromium intake, you have to watch your vanadium intake, you have to watch your zinc intake. What are the foods that you have to eat in order to get that? Most people don't know.